Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. Glad you could make time for us today. We have a very important topic that we're going to be covering, a very timely topic. I appreciate you joining us. Today, our speaker is Fabiola Negron from Registrar Corp. She's the Director of Food Safety. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Microbiology and graduate coursework in Food Science and Technology from the University of Puerto Rico. Since joining Registrar Corp in 2016, her team has reviewed and developed over 2,000 food safety plans across HACCP, Food Defense, FSVP, et cetera, for FDA compliance. Fabiola has written numerous articles regarding food safety and has been interviewed by numerous trade publications, including most recently an article in Risk Management magazine entitled USDA Budget Cuts Present Food Safety Risk. Man, I can't get that out. But anyways, you can Google Fabiola. She's well published and sought after by many trade publications seeking her expert advice and her point of view. Throughout this webinar, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A box. Fabiola will be taking Q&A at the end of this session. If we don't get to all of your questions, because we know that in the past, our participants have been very active and asked a lot of questions. If we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow up with you individually. Also, there will be a short survey at the end of this. We highly encourage you guys to answer the survey. It literally will take you 15 seconds to click through the 3 different questions, but we do value your feedback so that we can continue to deliver quality webinars to you guys and make these even better and more rich for you. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Fabiola.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be talking to you today about the FDA inspections process. I'm excited to present this webinar, and our agenda for today will be covering the FDA food facility inspection protocols, the inspection classifications, the top 5 inspection violations for fiscal year 2025 to date, how to prepare for an inspection, and the FDA actions and how to respond to them. We will also include an update on FDA's most recent announcement, and that will be our first topic for today. So on May 6th, the FDA announced their intent on expanding the use of unannounced inspections to foreign facilities. Unannounced inspections have been the standard procedure for U.S. facilities, and the FDA simply shows up to inspect without any notice. However, this will be a new procedure for many foreign facilities. As we will learn later in this presentation, foreign facilities were given ample time to prepare as the FDA coordinated their travel and inspection arrangements months in advance to reaching the facility. So now don't think that this won't impact importers and manufacturers in the US as well. Foreign suppliers are now at higher risk of not passing FDA inspections, which results in regulatory actions that impact the activities for the supply chain program and the FSVP approvals, the verifications, the corrective actions that are required. So more oversight for your suppliers, that can have an impact in your business as well. So how does it impact the foreign manufacturers? You must always be compliant and inspection ready, as you may not know when the FDA might show up. So we cannot confirm how the FDA will achieve this new mission, as they have not provided another update since this announcement of May 6th. But what we can foresee as the technologies advance, more data is readily available to them, is that they are looking for new ways to check compliance more efficiently and with less resources. So another avenue for this could be collaborating more with foreign governments to combine efforts. As an example, they've been collaborating for years with countries like China, India, and Mexico, which have their own FDA offices in their countries. So now jumping into the inspection overview. So why does the FDA inspect food facilities? FDA is tasked with safeguarding public health, and they do so by evaluating and inspecting the activities and conditions for processing, packing, or holding of foods for human or animal consumption. They ensure that industry complies with the FDA Act laws and regulations. And this oversight is meant to prevent the distribution or importation of unsafe or adulterated foods in the United States. The FDA has also a legal authority to issue enforcement actions when noncompliance is found. It is important to remember that the FDA is a government agency that upholds the requirements for distributing or importing foods to the United States that are safe and not adulterated. It is not a voluntary action to comply with the FDA requirements if you export, import, or process foods for consumption within the United States. The inspectors are not a third party auditor and they're not issuing certifications or to be seen as consultants. There are three main inspection types. There are those that are for surveillance, for cause, or for follow ups. Surveillance are the inspections that are scheduled routinely. These are normal inspections. There's nothing triggering this inspection. It's simply the norm and the routine to conduct regular inspections. These are typically based on risk and impact. Then the for cause inspections are triggered by complaints or repeat violations, a recall, or an outbreak. And follow up inspections are meant to check if previous inspection observations have been resolved. So, how does the FDA prioritize these inspections? The FDA decides inspection priorities based on higher risk, current trends, and data. And this list is in no particular order. It simply depicts the information that the FDA considers. So they consider the risk level of the foods. So facilities producing high risk foods like ready to eat foods, seafood, cheeses, sprouts, fresh produce, eggs or nut butters, these are more likely to be prioritized. The FDA has identified high risk foods on their food traceability list. I bet you've all heard about this new food traceability rule that is in progress of being enforced and was pushed back recently, that compliance date. However, the FDA has identified there the foods that they consider to be most high risk so that they can prioritize traceability requirements for these. So these foods have been linked to many recalls or outbreaks in the past. Then we have a facilities compliance history. So facilities with a history of violations like past recalls or enforcement actions are more likely to be inspected to ensure compliance with their corrective measures, to ensure that they reach compliance, they took corrective actions, and that they maintain that level of compliance moving forward. So what you don't want to do is end up on FDA action lists. You don't want to receive 483s. You don't want to receive a warning letter. You want to stay clear from those violations so that the FDA is, understands that you're compliant and they don't repeatedly inspect or request you to provide testing results at port of entry or any other type of information. Then we have by facility type and size. So larger facilities, as well as those involved in widespread distribution of products, might be inspected more frequently due to their potential impact on a larger population. However, this does not mean that smaller facilities will not be inspected. They certainly are, and you must be prepared. But in terms of risk, you know, larger facilities that distribute products to a larger population are of FDA's priority list. Then we have emerging risks or trends. So facilities that produce foods linked to recent outbreaks or contamination issues are also prioritized. So data from recalls, outbreaks, or the FDA's reportable food registry may trigger inspections. Let's remember that infant formula outbreak with pathogenic bacteria that triggered more inspections of these facilities, and we have more outbreaks given for farms, etc. So these emerging risks will trigger more FDA inspections to a particular sector of industry as needed. Then we have the geographic location. Inspections may be prioritized in regions where specific risks or issues have been identified, such as a high rate of foodborne illness or certain agricultural practices, that are not in compliance. So geographical location can also be a factor that is considered here. Then consumer complaints. So complaints about specific products or facilities from consumers or competitors or employees can also trigger an inspection. So the FDA investigators and officers cannot be everywhere. They are a limited resource. Therefore, they may not always conduct inspections using their own investigators. So who can inspect a facility for FDA compliance? So the FDA can also partner with state agencies who act on behalf of the FDA here in the United States. And they may also partner with foreign countries through a memorandum of understanding or an MOU, or any other similar agreement, so that persons from that government may conduct the inspections and share the findings with the FDA. So, tying back to that unannounced inspection update, it is a possibility that the FDA would rely more potentially on government partners to conduct more inspections and cover more ground. Just a thought, but it's a possibility. So, when we talk about domestic inspections versus foreign inspections, in the grand scheme of things, these are equal. There is no difference between an inspection to a facility in the United States versus an inspection or the inspection process for a foreign manufacturer. However, the difference lies currently in the announcement of the inspection. So the announcement of the inspection is conducted for foreign or international facilities because the FDA would have to coordinate travel and coordinate the trip to be able to identify the correct address, the correct facility, be able to do their travel plans like the airplane tickets and the hotel they're staying at or transportation. All of those arrangements need to be taken care of prior to the FDA arriving to the country and your facility. Therefore, they allowed some time for that to happen, and therefore they needed to announce the inspection to the facilities. However, in the United States, unannounced, the FDA simply shows up and hands a notice of inspection in person. Whereas foreign international countries or facilities, the FDA would send that notice ahead of time via email and would communicate with that facility to ensure that they can plan the trip, in the best way possible. So now we will go into the protocols of the inspection. So step number one in an inspection we mentioned is to receive the notice of inspection. And this is to present the credentials, to the firm and notify them that they will be inspected. That marks the start of the inspection officially. As mentioned, a domestic facility will receive an NOI in person. The FDA officer simply arrives at that facility unannounced and conducts the inspection. But for foreign facilities, for now, they will receive a prior notice due to the agency's scheduling and planning needs. In the case of the foreign inspections as well, that NOI is delivered via email, and it is important to check the veracity of the email that you received when receiving this NOI. We've seen cases where that there has been an unofficial email sending these NOIs to try to trick the person. However, it's important that you verify that the email domain is from the at fda.hhs.gov. You must reply to the FDA within 5 days. And the email will have attached to it a factory profile, which is just a form that you need to complete that asks information about the facility, like the name of the facility or the business, the location, the scheduled hours of operation, number of employees, the foods that are processed there. And it will also request you to recommend nearby transportation and hotels for the inspector. This just helps them plan better. and be safe. It helps them also to plan the scope of the inspection, all that information about your facility, so that they can plan how to go about the inspection and which requirements they are going to inspect you on. So failure to reply to this notice can be interpreted as a refusal to be inspected. And this can result in regulatory action like a suspension of your registration. If you are exporting products to the United States, you are registered with the FDA, you cannot refuse an FDA inspection. If you do so, then you might risk getting your registration suspended. So the next step is the opening meeting. So the opening meeting will begin with general introductions. It'll give you an opportunity to gather the responsible persons in that room so they can, meet with the FDA investigator. The owner or most responsible person has to be present as they are the ones with the most authority at the firm, and there will be official documents that they will need to sign. The FDA investigator will begin to gather information from those present, like their names, their titles, their credentials, or identification, to make sure that they identify who was in that room and their roles. The investigator will share the purpose of the inspection. As we discussed, these inspections may be due to a routine surveillance or a follow-up, or maybe an investigation of a consumer complaint or an outbreak. So the FDA will express why they are there. When providing that notice of inspection, that formally notifies the facility of the inspection and establishes the FDA's authority under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to conduct that inspection. They will outline what the inspection will cover, like specific regulatory requirements like preventive controls, HACCP, food defense, or others, and specify product lines or processes or operations that they'd want to review. That they're going to let you know they're going to review records and procedures and the food safety practices in the facility, and they might require to conduct environmental or product sampling. So they will let you know of their activities. They will discuss also practical details about the investigation, the areas of the facility that they might want to inspect, the time frame for the inspection. Some inspections can go from 2 days to 5 days. It just depends on the size of your facility, the products that they want to inspect. So we've known of facilities having FDA for a full 5 days at their facility inspecting and reviewing records. Then you will also be clarifying the roles of your staff within that meeting, identifying the primary contact person or the liaison at the facility for the duration of the inspection. Not everybody is equipped to manage an FDA inspection, so be sure that you have your quality manager or director, the person that knows the most about the operation, so that they can answer the questions in the best way possible, give accurate and complete information to the FDA. And then there are required records and documentation that the FDA will request, not necessarily at the opening meeting, but later on. The FDA inspector will also give you an opportunity to ask some questions. You have a right to ask questions about the inspection, about the FDA process, and they will answer those to the best of their ability. And they will also ask you to describe your facility. What are your key processes and products? They can ask you about safety and quality control measures that you have in place, the organizational structure. And that opening meeting is meant to be quick. It seems like a lot of information, but when you're talking back and forth, it can go pretty quickly. And they've done this before many, many times, so they already have their standard questions that they ask, and they might have a list or a checklist of information they want to get out. But the important thing here is that they want this meeting to be short and to the point so they can go and start inspecting to do an initial walkthrough. and that is step number 3. So that first walkthrough is done for the investigator to become more familiar with the operation and to plan their inspection strategy. And they will look for key areas of focus and risk. It is important to know that the FDA investigators are advised to follow the firm sanitation program for employees, such as washing and sanitizing hands and or shoes, or wearing any protective garments that you require your employees to wear. So do not be afraid to inform the investigator of your protocol and ask them to follow it. This is a positive thing. Do not be scared to do that. It's a positive observation that you are requiring your visitors to follow the food safety protocols to ensure there's no contamination of your facility or the products. So that is an expectation that they have. So this walkthrough is a visual inspection of the manufacturing site, and it helps in establishing the depth of the inspection, learning about the products and processes, identifying sources of manufacturing records, and identifying potential areas of concern. They also take a first glance into your employee practices and the overall operations. So it is important to know that even though the official inspection starts when the FDA delivers that NOI to you, the inspection starts before they even knock on your door. When they get off that car or taxi, they are already observing the facility, the surroundings, the building. Is there trash outside? Is there a lot of bushes that may, or plants that are overgrown and might harbor pests? So those are things that the FDA investigator is already observing as soon as they stand outside of your building. Now, once they go in, they're also observing. Some buildings might not have a receiving area. They might just go straight into production areas, or as they're walking into that office or space for that initial meeting, the FDA investigator is already observing whatever possible to note if there's anything that could potentially cause contamination of your products. So keep that in mind. That is not only what happens inside the building, also the exterior and the building itself is important. So the FDA has the authority to request and access your records, especially when there is a reasonable belief that a food is adulterated or poses a health risk. So facilities are required to provide these records promptly upon request during an inspection. The specific records requested will depend on the facility's operations, the type of the food that's being produced, and the purpose of the inspection, whether it's a routine, for cause, or a follow-up. So the records can include the food safety or HACCP plans. It can include your supply chain program or supplier approval processes, supplier verification records, sanitation and hygiene procedures, food defense plan, your recall plan, employee training records, batch production records, maintenance and calibration records are also very important. If you're handling equipment that is not calibrated, that is an observation the investigator will definitely note in the observations. Process filings, if you have low acid canned food or acidified food products, the FDA investigator can request to see if you have submitted those process filings to the FDA, and many other records. There's countless records that the FDA can request associated to the good manufacturing practices, to sanitation procedures, to employee hygiene, food safety, control measures, corrective actions, you name it. Then step number 5 is the facility inspection. So the inspection walkthrough is more thorough and structured and intended to identify risk and ensure that the food products meet the safety standards before reaching consumers. So there will be a detailed examination of specific areas like processing and manufacturing lines to observe how the food products are processed, handled, and packaged. They will check for proper implementation of preventive controls, such as temperature controls or allergen management, sanitation practices, process preventive controls, etc. For storage areas, they will inspect the storage conditions for raw materials, for ingredients and finished products. They will make sure to ensure that proper temperature control or stock rotations, pest prevention, all those things associated to proper storage of food are being implemented. They will also, as I mentioned, check the facility's infrastructure. So, not just that the food is being produced safely, but the building. Is the building conducive of a safe environment for the production of food? So, they will examine the walls, the floors, the ceilings, drainage for signs of contamination risk, maintenance issues. They will inspect the lighting, the ventilation, the water supply for compliance with food safety standards. Then they will also observe employee practices, so their personal behavior, monitoring how the employees handle food and follow the hygiene protocols like hand washing or wearing their protective clothing like hair nets or beard nets, protective shoes, all those things. They will interview those employees and ask them about their roles and the tasks that they are conducting. It is important that if you have an employee working on a metal detector, that employee has been trained on the usage of the metal detector, trained on the importance of the metal detector, trained on how to act upon a metal detector detecting metal. So all those actions and activities, that person should be an expert on the task and the role that they are performing. So the training of employees for the task that they're conducting is crucial to ensure that your system is working. They will also, as I mentioned, conduct environmental and product sampling if they deem necessary. So they can collect samples of product, ingredients, or environmental samples. They can also request samples of your product labels to verify allergen declarations and other labeling issues. They will focus mostly on high risk areas, paying particular attention to areas where cross contamination can happen or where pathogen growth is more likely to occur, such as ready to eat food zones, for example. They will review the records and procedures, comparing what is observed during the walkthrough to the facility's written procedures and your records. So if you say in your food safety plan that you're checking temperature every 2 hours and that you're writing that down in a form, the FDA inspector will verify, okay, let me see, do your records reflect that every 2 hours that temperature was taken? Was that temperature what it was supposed to be? And if it wasn't, what corrective actions did the firm take? So all those, whatever is designated in your food safety plan or in your process procedures, that is what the FDA expects to see in terms of record keeping and in terms of your employees' behavior. Then ongoing communication. The inspector will be constantly communicating with you. They are going to be asking questions or seeking clarification from management and staff during the walkthrough. They will conduct preliminary observations that could be shared along the way to allow you to perform immediate corrections or to further explain why things are being conducted in that manner. So there are certain things that you could potentially immediately fix, or they might say, hey, you need to clean this equipment. That's something that it can easily be fixed, and that might require a change in your sanitation documentation or procedures. But those are things that you can go and relay to your team so that it can begin getting fixed. They will be documenting those observations along the way. So they will be taking notes. They could take photographs of any non-compliance or potential violations, and they will highlight the significant issues that could impact public health, such as the evidence of contamination or things like inadequate temperature controls. So then, after the FDA has verified your documentation, they have walked through the facility. Let's remember that inspections could be 2 to 5 days. So these things could be happening at different periods. It is not a specific order of like I checked the facility, now I check the records, or I check the records first and then the facility. This is happening back and forth. So based on what your information says, the FDA investigator might want to check a specific area of the facility and then go back and realize, oh, I want to check this other area. So, it's up to them how they conduct that inspection. But at the conclusion of the inspection, the investigator will discuss with the firm's management the significant findings and concerns. And if there were findings and concerns, they will leave a written report of any conditions or practices that the investigator decides that indicate objectionable conditions. So that is called a inspectional observation, and that is also referred to as an FDA Form 483. So if you receive a Form 483 at the end of your inspection, that means that they were observations or non-compliances found. So the investigator may provide some verbal observations for some minor compliance issues, or they will issue this written observation for significant compliance concerns. Then the facility will be required to provide and implement corrective actions. Some corrective actions may already be taken or set into motion at the time of the inspection, as I mentioned earlier, but others may take more time to plan. Let's say that you did not have sanitary facilities for hand washing at the processing floor or before entering the processing floor. That is going to take you more than a day. You're going to have to buy a sink. You're going to have to make some modifications for the pipes to go through the water. So you need time to set up a hand washing station versus cleaning something up or rearranging an area to make it, less propense to conduct for contamination. There are other things that you might make quick fixes of, but there are things that would require you to maybe change the layout of your facility or change, like I said, implement or add on sanitary facilities, which take weeks or months to correct. The FDA will allow you up like 15 days to respond to that 483 response with your corrective actions. This meeting is not a negotiation, so the officer is simply reporting their findings and they cannot make any definitive conclusions. They are reporting what they observed and that's what they will discuss. The inspector emphasizes that the closeout meeting does not finalize the inspection report or determine the FDA's final decision. So the classification of your inspection or the results are not final in that closeout meeting. The final decision of the inspection is done by other FDA officials who will evaluate the inspection observations and a detailed investigator's report. And they may provide guidance or reference to regulatory requirements to help you address any deficiencies. So we've seen this before. The FDA might say, based on your observations, we have this FDA guidance. We recommend that you take a look and your team then can decide how to best go about the corrective actions. The FDA won't tell you what specific actions you need to take, but they can share information or regulatory, obviously reference the regulatory requirements, but we've seen that they could also provide an FDA guidance document that's relevant to your observation. So then step number 7, we mentioned that the FDA does a detailed report that then is evaluated by other FDA personnel. So the EIR, or Establishment Inspection Report, is a detailed narrative of what happened during the inspection. And it includes a description of the overall operations of the facility, the activities conducted, the persons involved or questioned during the inspection, the conditions that were observed, and other relevant details. And this document is submitted to the FDA supervisory personnel for review so they can designate an inspection classification. Be advised that this can take like 3 to 6 months for you to receive that EIR back. And do not confuse it with the 483, which FDA provides at the end of the inspection when violations are found. So the 483 is immediately after the inspection. They'll issue it, they'll give you the observations. However, the establishment inspection report is a very detailed report. It has lots of pages, and they describe everything that happened during the inspection and will issue it with the inspection classification, which is the results of the inspection. So the results are three. It can be no action indicated, which means that there were no significant violations found during the inspection, and the firm appears to be compliant, and you pass the inspection with no further actions required. That is the best possible result that you can receive. Now, that doesn't mean that you're fully compliant with the FDA. That just means that during that inspection, the products that they reviewed, the processes that they reviewed, that was found to be compliant. There were no observations found. Then goes voluntary action indicated. This means that violations were observed and a 43 is issued requesting voluntary corrective actions. But it's still a pass. No further actions will be taken by the FDA if the firm provides the appropriate corrective actions to achieve compliance. So the FDA may do a follow-up to verify that those corrective actions were taken, or they may just check in the next inspection. So failure to take corrective actions can result in further actions like receiving a warning letter or lead to an official action indicated in the following inspection. So it's important that if you receive a 483, we know it doesn't look scary. It's just a form with some observations, and you may be like, yeah, I'll just wait for the next inspection. But then the next inspection can be, can take a different direction in terms of escalation. So it's important that when you receive that document, you act as quickly as possible to make sure that you respond with your corrective actions, that you have the evidence needed to get out of trouble. Then official action indicated is where significant violations were identified or a firm failed to fix previous compliance concerns. And a 483 is also issued, but the corrective actions are mandatory. If issues are not resolved, it can escalate to more serious enforcement actions such as warning letters or a product recall. So inaction, definitely more severe, and it can lead up to a suspension of your registration if you are found to have severe observations. Another enforcement action that can be triggered with these is import alerts. For those that export products from foreign countries into the United States, import alerts will prevent you from importing your product to the United States, and these can be triggered by official action indicated during an inspection. So now let's discuss the FDA top citations for fiscal year 2025 to date. We still have 5 months left of fiscal year 2025, so that's why we say to date, as the fiscal year is reset in October. But we are sharing the most updated data from most recent so that you have the most recent information. So we chose from those top 10 violations that were listed in the previous slide, we chose the top 5 citations, and we have grouped them in general areas and provided you with the specific citations to give you a better picture. And you will note that most of these fall under the scope of good manufacturing practice requirements, which we've discussed in our previous webinars, that these are the basic requirements that provide a solid foundation for your food safety system. So the GMPs are the bare minimum that you have to produce safe food. And if you're failing on that, then that will impact the foundation of your food safety plan or other procedures that you have in place. So at number 1, we have pest control. You did not exclude pests from your food plan to protect against contamination of food. So, lack of a pest control program, having broken windows or screens, the areas that are exposed to the exterior, such as receiving docks without door or air curtains to provide that barrier for the pests, inadequate trash control inside of the facility or around the plant, that can cause a place where it attracts pests, and you don't want pests anywhere near your plant. At number two, we have sanitary operations related to plant maintenance. So you did not maintain your plant in a clean and sanitary condition and inadequate repair. So equipment and plant maintenance is crucial to reduce the risk for food safety hazards. Cracks in the equipment or condensation in the coolers are examples of issues that can result in contamination with pathogens. Peeling paint, broken utensils can cause a physical contamination of the food that renders it adulterated. So it's important that the equipment and the plant maintenance are up to date so that you can prevent either physical or biological hazards from entering your food. Number three, we have personnel. You did not take reasonable measure or precaution related to personnel practices. So personnel practices were inadequate. They were likely not following the basic GMPs related to hygienic practices. Maybe there weren't any, they weren't following hand washing protocols or wearing the protective clothing that they're supposed to. Illness control. If you have sick employees, they cannot be placed to work near the foods. They could be in other areas where contamination is not possible, or just not come to work altogether. And there might be other cross contamination risks associated. They likely observed activities by personnel that contribute to the contamination of the food. Maybe they were eating inside the plant area, or having food, or storing materials that aren't not part of the processing controls or the processing environment. They could be wearing jewelry or rings that can promote the contamination of the food. Number four, the hazard analysis. So the identification of hazards was not properly done for hazards that required a preventive control. So it is important to have a qualified individual conduct your hazard analysis. This qualified individual must have the knowledge, training, and experience to conduct a hazard analysis, and they should be familiar with FDA regulatory requirements and guidance to ensure that the hazards considered by the FDA are also addressed in the plan. So ensure to search in FDA resources and other scientific data to support your determinations and to identify the proper significant hazards associated with your food and your process and the necessary controls. And then lastly, at number five, the manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding controls. You did not conduct operations under conditions and controls necessary to minimize the potential for contamination of food, pathogen growth, or allergen cross contact. This may include inadequate temperature controls. The food was not protected from the environment, or equipment and utensils were not properly cleaned and sanitized, inadequate allergen control measures, or using adulterated raw materials. So all of those are examples of inadequate controls in manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding of food according to the GMPs. So it's important, again, GMPs are your solid foundation, and then you build upon that with your food safety plan or other procedures for food safety. If your GMPs are failing, your food safety plan will fail. You can't fail at GMPs and have a successful food safety plan implemented. So the FDA has various ways to enforce the requirements, and they can take different actions based on the severity and recurrence of the violations. So we have the citations that we mentioned. They're issued during the inspections, and these are the 483s. Then we have the warning letters, which is a step of escalation where a firm has failed to provide responses to 483s, or they have repeated violations or more severe violations. So the FDA, it's up to their determination if a warning letter is needed, but these are published, and every citation or observation is published in their FDA data dashboard. But these warning letters are, ready for anyone to view, which can give them more details about what your violations were and the activities that you were failing at. There can be refusals at the port of entry. FDA can refuse a product found in violation of the FD&C Act. So if they stop your shipment, conduct sampling and testing, or take other different types of samples, if found violative, they can refuse your shipment. Then that can also escalate into an import alert. And an import alert is where the FDA detains your shipment without physical examination. So they simply detain it and it's up for refusal. There are two different types of import alerts. There's the green list, which is good, which means that if your food is on a green list, you're approved to ship that food to the United States. You provided information that led the FDA to believe that you are compliant and your food is safe, and you are on that green list. The green list applies to those import alerts that are countrywide. So, for example, they have a countrywide import alert for cantaloupe from Mexico. So if you're exporting cantaloupe from Mexico to the United States, you have to demonstrate to the FDA that your cantaloupe is compliant, or that you have compliant procedures in place before you ship. And they put you on that green list and you're okay to ship. But then there's the red list, and the red list is for facility specific import alerts. So there might be an import alert for salmonella in black pepper. So if your product, if you've shipped black pepper and FDA has found salmonella, your facility will be on that red list, but everybody else can still ship black pepper to the United States. But only those found to have salmonella are going to be placed on import alert, and you cannot ship your product until you demonstrate compliance to be removed of the list. So green list, you have to be on the list to be able to import to the United States. And if you're on the red list, then you cannot import to the United States. You have to be removed from the list to be able to import to the United States or export to the United States. So with that import alert, the FDA will stop every shipment and refuse it unless you demonstrate that that shipment is compliant. But you have to submit a petition in order to be removed from a red list with FDA. Then recalls, which requires the removal of violative product from the market. And these can be issued voluntarily by a firm or mandated by the FDA. So let's say the FDA inspected you and they found a very significant concern regarding food safety in product that has already been distributed. They will ask you to perform a voluntary recall. And if you say, okay, we will get on that right now, no problem. You will conduct your recall, you will take the steps for the recall, and the FDA will then check for effectiveness of those recalls, to see how it's progressing, and they will stay in contact with you. However, if they say there is an issue with your product, it has been distributed to the public, we recommend a recall, and you say, no, sir, we're not conducting any recall, then the FDA has the authority to mandate a recall. So it's important that if your product is found violative and it has been distributed, that you take the proper steps to recall that product. First and foremost, to protect the public, protect the consumers that are, using your products or taking your products. But secondly, to cooperate with the authorities, right? With the FDA authorities. Then suspension of your registration. You cannot import or distribute food into interstate commerce without a proper FDA registration. So if your FDA registration has been suspended, you're unable to sell, distribute your products in the United States. It is important that you maintain compliance to prevent a suspension of your FDA registration. And then civil and criminal charges such as fines or even jail. We've seen an example of the Peanut Corporation of America where peanut butter with salmonella was distributed to the public, and it was knowingly. The people in the facility, the quality manager and the owner, knowingly distributed product with salmonella, which resulted in death and illness. So severe consequences included jail time for those people. It is important that you act ethically, that you knowingly do not distribute any contaminated products. We know that accidents happen. We know that sometimes there are gaps in our systems and we have to do our best to prevent them, but nothing is 100% effective. So we must be conducting those verifications properly to make sure that to the best of our ability, we're always doing the best that we can to maintain food safety, to take action when action is needed, or corrective actions when issues arise because lives are at stake. You are making foods, so this is very, very important. So as I mentioned before, all of these compliance actions are published on the FDA's data dashboard website. So your customers, consumers, competitors, they can access this data and see your compliance status with the FDA. Not acting on fixing or preventing these issues not only puts the consumers at risk, but can also cause irreparable harm to your brand and your company image. So it is important to stay compliant to make sure that you convey the importance of quality control and food safety at your plant. Be sure to have a healthy food safety culture, that your employees understand the why behind all these procedures and processes. It's like, why do I have a 30-item checklist for the sanitation protocol? It's so tedious, it's a burden. Because if you don't follow this, people can get sick and people can die. It's important that we have that understanding and explain the why behind all our procedures. So if you received a 483 or a warning letter, what do you do? So, you have to first and foremost review the observations. You have to carefully go over the observations with your food safety team. Go to the expert at your facility and evaluate those observations to be sure that you can then identify the root cause, identify why this happened, where did we fail, did we follow our procedure? What is our procedure? First of all, get all the information that you need to make an informed decision. Then formulate the corrective action plan. So when identifying the root cause, then you can identify a solution for that problem. So then you have to identify what will you do to fix it, how you're going to fix it, when, and who is going to do it. Be detailed in the type of actions, controls, and provide timelines for implementing those changes. So when you are compiling that information, it's important to be as detailed as possible so that you can then compile all the supporting evidence that you need to show that you did the right corrective action, that you applied the controls that were needed, and that you can identify the proper timelines for implementing that. In compiling your supporting evidence, this has to demonstrate that the actions that you identified have been taken care of or are in progress. So it's important that everything that you list that was an issue, that you also have a solution and you detail how it was resolved, when it will be resolved, and who is in charge of resolving it. And when you have all that data, then you can draft your response to the FDA. You must list the observation and the action plan for each of one of them below each of the observations. So there's not a specific format for this, but it is the most it makes the most sense to list your observation, have your action plan below, and then reference any supporting documentation that you will attach to that response so that the FDA can see the evidence. So one example, maybe the FDA found issues with your food safety plan. So if you come to us, we're going to list that observation and we're going to say, I have acquired Registrar Corp's assistance in drafting my food safety plan. They have qualified individuals. Here is their qualification. And here is a copy of my agreement with Registrar Corp in that they will help me. So that shows the story that yes, you hired a third party, you have the agreement, you have a qualified person that's writing your plan, and you can provide an estimated time of completion for when you're going to deliver that to the FDA. And that's the whole story. You took action, it was a proper action, you have a qualified person helping you now, and this is the date by which it will be done. So that is just an example of a proper response to the FDA. So you must describe those corrective actions in detail, and the response cannot be vague or leave observations unaddressed. So if you're giving a response to the FDA and you simply say, yes, I hired a third party to help me, that's not sufficient. It's like, okay, well, which third party? And what are they doing for you? And so they will come back with follow-up questions, and your warning letter or 483 won't be closed until you provide proper corrective actions. So, if you are struggling with a response, we can help you. Remember, you have a 15-day window to provide an appropriate response. And that doesn't mean all the issues need to be fixed by day 15. It means that you have to have that action plan, already formulated by day 15. So a food safety plan could take 2 weeks, 3 weeks to write or develop and review and approve at your facility. Those things take time. So there's not an expectation that you must have your food safety plans in 15 days. It's more the corrective actions that you will take. And that leads us into Registrar Corp's compliance solutions. So how can we help you get compliant and inspection ready? So one of the ways that we can do this is through our mock inspection services. So one of our highly qualified specialists will observe the conditions of your facility and certain key documents to assess compliance with the FDA food safety requirements. And you will receive a report listing the issues observed and recommendations on corrective actions to take. So our team has achieved a 100% pass rate for our clients, 95% of those achieving a no action indicated. Remember, this is the best classification that you can receive, no 483. So our auditors have a wealth of experience, having conducted over 400 mock inspections worldwide in over 60 countries. We have some very qualified folks here that have a lot of experience, have seen so many processes throughout the years, and they are ready to identify your gaps and provide you recommendations on how to fix that before the FDA does. And another way that Registrar Corp can help you get compliant and inspection ready is through our plans and program solutions. So we have different levels of service to review or draft or create your food safety plans, HACCP plans, food defense, and more. If you just need more information and guidance on FDA compliance, our hourly consulting allows that flexibility to meet and tailor to your needs. Our specialists are food scientists and professionals with a mix of regulatory compliance backgrounds and industry experience, and we have an amazing team to support you in your compliance journey. So do not hesitate to contact us and let us become your compliance resource and partner. And now we have reached our Q&A session. Let me open up your questions. Ooh, we have a lot. Okay, so bear with me a little while I sort through your questions so I can go from the first. I can go in order here. So we will share a recording at the end. So if you registered, you will automatically receive an email with our recording so that you can watch it or share it with your colleagues or other professionals. So that will not be a problem. It will be shared at the end. Okay. Tina Nigmeyer asked, hello, are pet food manufacturers also inspected? Yes, the FDA inspects food for human and animal consumption. So requirements for pet food in 21 CFR 507, that's the requirements that the FDA will verify for pet food manufacturers. Charmaine Gaudron asked, will the list of companies inspected next year be published? No, the FDA does not have a list of companies they will inspect. They do share the information of the companies that were inspected in the past year. So we do have the data. That's the data that I was able to gather those observations from their FDA data dashboard. If you Google that, you can in different ways manipulate, filter the data to see the data that you want. But you can have there is the list of the inspections and the classifications and even the citations that were issued during those inspections. Maria Fernanda Parias asks, what happens if your facility is closed for holidays? So that is part of why the inspections were also announced, because the FDA wanted to confirm the hours of operation. And we know that certain countries have different holidays. Some countries could have a month-long holiday. So the FDA, I bet, based on their experience already with those countries, I'm sure they have those marked in their calendars to be sure to not schedule inspections during holidays. But that was also why it was part of an announced inspection to make sure. There are also facilities that do seasonal production. So maybe the first half of the year you're producing, the next half you're closed. So the FDA would announce the inspection and confirm the dates of operation to be sure that you were open and processing the foods. Sergio Reina asks, how much is the cost of an inspection, of an FDA inspection? The FDA inspection, it has no cost. This is a regulatory requirement. The FDA is a regulatory agency. They are simply doing their job. They are not going to charge you for an inspection. However, if there is a reinspection required because they found significant violations at your facility, then there is the chance that FDA may charge you for reinspection fees, which can include the travel costs, the lodging, the transportation, and it can be also an hourly rate for the inspector to do their job. So it's important that if you have been issued a notice of inspection, or that you're always ready to be compliant so that reinspection fees might not apply. I'm not aware of FDA actually enforcing that as of yet. I'm not sure. But they do have a clause where they can charge for reinspection fees if compliance issues are found and they have to return to your facility subsequently. Let me see here. So Colin Haycroft asks, happy to receive an audit unannounced, but how does the FDA determine the size of audit team and what is the duration of an audit? So the auditor is just one person. They're not sending a team to inspect you. It's possible that they send more than one inspector if they're this is related to an outbreak situation. Maybe they have multiple people taking samples, or it's an ongoing investigation. They might have a team dedicated to conducting that work, but otherwise, it's simply one inspector visiting your facility. In some cases, you might add a translator if necessary, but they're not an official FDA person. So, yes, the auditor is just one. And the duration of the audit, it, like I mentioned, it just depends on the size of the facility. It depends on the scope of how many products they want to inspect. So that is really up to FDA to determine how many days they need to fulfill their duties and inspect you appropriately. Okay. So Eleanor Hall asks, what about language barriers between auditor and key members of the staff? So the FDA, with the announced inspections, they would ask if you required translators, or if you would have somebody in your facility that spoke English that can facilitate the communication for you. So that is something that you set up with the FDA auditor. With the unannounced inspections, that's a good point. Like, you would not be able to plan ahead of time to have someone that can speak the language. So that's why I'm leaning more towards the FDA having arrangements with the different countries, because then they could have people that are local that can speak the language, and language barriers would not be an issue as well. So that's my opinion. I cannot guarantee that, but that is a potential solution to that problem. Gabriel Hillman asks, what about the language of the records? Do we have to translate them during inspection? So the FDA will allow you a reasonable time frame for you to translate any records that they deem critical to the inspection. So if you have your processing records, maybe by hand and they're in another language, then they might allow you a couple of days or a week, depending on how many records need to be translated. They will allow you a reasonable time to then translate all those records to English so the inspector can read them. That's a great question. Mm, 1 minute. Maria Concepcion Patsy Vaya asks, the 483 form is the FDA checklist? No, the form 483 is the inspectional observations. So the FDA will list the observations that they observed during the inspection. So if they observe that the hazard analysis does not identify the proper hazards and preventive controls, that's an observation. Or they can say, employees were observed not washing their hands before entering the processing facility or the processing area, then that's another observation. Or they could issue, equipment, metal detector equipment was not calibrated at the frequency necessary to ensure that it was working properly. That can be another observation. So the FDA will list what they observed and then request you to provide corrective actions to those observations. So Bruno Antunes asks, does the inspection focus only on products exported to the United States or also on other products? Great question, Bruno. They will focus on the products for the United States. They don't inspect products that are going to be exported to other countries or, just sold locally in your country. They will focus on what is going to be sent to the United States. So Ruvat Robin asks, do nutritional supplements undergo CFR Part 111? Yes, you are correct. The dietary supplements are subject to the CGMP regulation in 21 CFR 111. Okay. You have some great questions, everyone. Let me see. I'm finding some repeated ones, so that's why it's taking me a little bit. Um, Pavitra Supramanian asks, will non-food product areas facilities in the same premise having the food product facility will be inspected? So I'm thinking they do non-food products and food products within the same premises. So the FDA will not inspect those non-food product areas, but what they will inspect is to make sure that those non-food product activities are contaminating the food product area. So it's important that you keep those separate, or that you make sure that you have proper procedures to ensure that that non-food product is not contaminating or impacting the food safety. So Katarina Hammer asks, from your experience, do the auditors have in-depth industry knowledge? We are a flavor manufacturer or just a food industry background. Should the introductory meeting take this into account? So the inspectors definitely have different levels of expertise. Some might be newer than others, some are very seasoned. In general terms, the inspection process is very standard. So they're looking for key components that are requirements in the regulations for you to meet food safety. They're not necessarily going to assess the adequacy of your product necessarily. So it's a little bit, you know, of an unknown there. It depends on what the focus on the inspection is. However, I mentioned the FDA inspector can take, they will request product information, they will request label information. So when they go back, and the process of the EIR is taking place, they're reviewing more in depth all of the information that they've gathered. They may find other compliance concerns. They may find that you have an unapproved color in your product, or that you have an unapproved additive in your product. So it's not necessarily to say that they will find every observation during that inspection time frame of 2 to 5 days, but later on they might say, well, we discovered that this label lists this product, or lists this ingredient that's unapproved, and they might come back and provide that. They might come back with other observations. They do have different levels, like I said, of knowledge or experience in the industry. They go through a rigorous training program as well. So there might be some that are more seasoned versus some that are learning still some of the procedures, but overall they have their instructions manual, their guidance manuals that they use to conduct inspections as consistently as possible. So let's see. I will try to answer around three more questions. Okay, let's see. So Jesus Toledo asks, how much notice do they give for a food safety inspection? So the current process is that the FDA sends a notice of inspection to a foreign manufacturer, and they coordinate the inspection activities and the travel. And that can take, they can send notice or um, like with 3 months in advance. That's the norm that we've seen, more or less 3 months in advance. However, they just announced that they have an intent to increase the unannounced inspections for foreign manufacturers. So we have to be ready now because we don't know. FDA has not announced when they will officially begin, or we don't know if they'll even announce that they're beginning. Maybe they'll just start and not say anything. So we just have to stay alert to any more updates. And we will definitely stay alert with our clients and see what the FDA activity is with them. Because as their US agent, we are notified when our clients are receiving an inspection. So we're able to get that insight as well into the inspection activity from the FDA. So we will certainly keep you in the loop about any new announcements or updates. Um, I see a lot of questions about the foreign government inspections. So, if you're inspected by your government right now and there is no MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with the FDA, your government inspection does not replace the FDA inspection. It's important to know that if the FDA goes into an agreement with a specific government that they have deemed their inspections to be comparable or equivalent to the FDA, then the FDA can rely on that government to conduct those inspections on their behalf. However, if there's no agreement between the governments, then the FDA will continue to inspect those countries as usual. Um, the FDA has a comparability agreement with Canada, with Australia, and with New Zealand. And that means that the FDA might conduct less inspections in those countries, unless they really have to, because they deem that those food safety systems are comparable to the FDA. And those countries have agreed to share information with the FDA when they find issues with facilities that are registered with the FDA. So they have that agreement of collaboration. Now that has to be expanded to other countries if they will solely rely on those country inspections to, substitute the FDA inspections. Okay, so Jatsiri Regalado asks, they have a commercial business in which they store and distribute fruit. What type of certification do they need? So the FDA doesn't work with certifications right now. They are a government agency, so they don't work with certifications. They require you to follow the appropriate regulations. So if you're storing and distributing fruit, it's possible that you are subject to the produce safety rule in 21 CFR 112. um, or if you are also cutting those fruits and packaging them, either refrigerated, then that would make your product subject to preventive controls rule, which would be 21 CFR 117. So it just depends on your activities. You need to follow those regulations. The FDA does not accept currently any other certifications to replace an FDA inspection or to deem you in compliance with FDA. So FDA would verify that themselves. They won't allow other certifications to substitute their inspections. However, there is a program called the Voluntary Qualified Importer Program, and there are certification bodies in that program that are equipped to make FDA like inspections and certify you. However, that is part of like that program to apply for that voluntary qualified importer program. That comes at a cost. Last time I checked, it was around $14,000 or $15,000 to apply for that program. But they do have certification bodies that do inspections in a manner that can demonstrate compliance with the FDA. How FDA is using that aside from the voluntary qualified importer program, I don't know. I don't have any information on that. Okay, and I'm just gonna take one more question. Let's see. Okay. I had a good question and I sort of clicked on the wrong button. So it was along the lines of what happens if I fail? So if you fail an inspection, that means you had an OAI. That is a complete failure of the inspection. Again, the FDA will allow you 15 days to respond with mandatory corrective actions. So this is not a like, hey, heads up, you have some compliance issues, send a response. It's like, this is a serious violation. This is official action being required of you. And if you don't provide the corrective actions or proper corrective actions, then they can be escalated to maybe an import alert. Official action indicated is the most serious observation you can get in an inspection. So the action required is going to be more strict than with just a normal 483 with a voluntary action indicated. So it's important that you act from the beginning. The best thing that you can do is prevent compliance concerns altogether. Always be ready, always be compliant. ABC, always be compliant. And then, prevent those voluntary action required or official action indicated. So it's important that you stay prevent those issues. And if you have any questions on whether you're compliant or if your food safety plans are up to date, or you would like for us to visit your facility either virtually or on site to conduct a mock inspection, let us know. That's the best way that you can identify if you have any gaps. We work with FDA regulations all all day, every day. That is our air that we breathe here at Registrar Corp. So we know our stuff, we know the regulations, we know what you have to have on hand, and our track record proves that we understand the requirements. So go on the safe side, partner with us, and we can help you identify any gaps or issues that you might have. I'm tempted to do one more. Let me see. Okay, so Jadwinder Singh asks, how does it work when a facility produces both FDA and USDA products in the same space? A previous employer had to separate sections in the facility specific to product under each agency. What's regulatory standing on that? So I'm not aware of there being a requirement that you have to separate the products from the production area. It's just making sure that you have proper controls to ensure that those meat products are not uh, impacting FDA products. But when they have dual jurisdiction, USDA is always required to be on site to verify compliance and, for the USDA products. The FDA can go inspect periodically. And the USDA does collaborate in a way with FDA to not duplicate efforts, because there's no point in having two inspectors at a facility. So the USDA and FDA also have agreements in place to collaborate as much as possible so that USDA inspector can also report back on findings or observations related to the FDA regulated products. But they have dual jurisdiction, it is shared. FDA products will be regulated by FDA, and USDA products will be regulated officially by the USDA. But I have not heard of that requirement that they needed to separate. Maybe they found an issue of cross contamination or some other observation that led them to require you to have those separate production areas. And the same thing happens for human foods and animal foods. They can still be produced in the same area. Is just making sure you have proper sanitation controls, you have proper practices to prevent cross contamination. It is recommended that when you have both, then you follow the most rigorous process so that when you're processing, there's no issue. I'm following the most rigorous process or to ensure the safety of both human food and animal products in the same manner. And that way you don't have to think about two different procedures or two different quality parameters, and you're just, following one main protocol to keep both food items safe. So this is the end. I'm so glad that you were able to join. I really hope that you contact us for our mock inspection services, our food safety plan services, or hourly consulting. Remember that we're here to support you and that we have the best experts out there to provide you the most accurate information on compliance. So thank you so much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.